भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
We continue with Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the Yoga of Knowledge, of Renunciation of Action. Now we have been at the verses 16 and 17, and then I started a little detour on trying to gain more understanding of the karma. We clearly understand that all karma is born of mind, and then it comes from the speech and the indriyas, the senses and the sense organs, which are divided into jnanendriyas and the karmendriyas. We have understood that the jnana-indriyas, these comprise the sense organs, and these are the chakshu indriya, which is the sense organ of sight or the eye, shrotra indriya, sense organ of hearing, which is the ear, grana indriya, which is the sense organ of smell, the nose, rasana indriya, sense organ of taste, which is the tongue, and the tvak indriya, which is the sense organ of touch, that is the skin. And then we have the karma indriyas, and karma here means action, and these indriyas involved in all in actions, and these comprise the motor organs. So again, there is the vak indriya, and it is the organ of speech. Pani indriya, it is the organ of grasping or holding the hands. Then there is the pada indriya, which is the organ of locomotion or the feet. The payu indriya, which is the organ of excretion, defecation, the anus and rectum. And upastha indriya, which is the organ of sex and procreation. Then in Ayurveda, mind is also listed as indriya, and it is called ubhaya indriya, because ubhaya means both, and it is both sensory and motor in function, and it is associated with both the sensory organs and with the motor organs while they are performing their functions. So the sensory organs being involved with the sensory perceptions, and then the motor organs being involved with the motor activities. So this ubhaya indriya is called the mind. And all of this is the basis of karma or the action. Now let's go back again to the verses 16 and 17. I will just read them and continue. What is action and what is inaction? Even the wise are bewildered here. I shall expound to you that action, knowing which you will be freed from evil. And Bhagavan continues further. Action indeed should be understood. Wrong action should also be understood, and inaction should be understood as well. Unfathomable is the course of action. Today, I want to bring more understanding about the mind, because it is through the mind so much of karma is created. Now, mind is referred to as a wave in the ocean of being. Here it is said, the unmanifested absolute being, stimulated by its own nature, prana, appears as mind. Just as an ocean stimulated by the wind appears as a wave. It is said that prana, supplemented by the influence of karma, is the mind. Karma by nature is inert, but this inert karma, supplemented by the life force prana, gives rise to the mind. And this mind, through prana, is connected with the unmanifested being. Here, mind is the second stage in the process of manifestation of creation, and the first is prana. Again, prana is the first expression of cosmic intelligence, and reflected upon by karma, the prana gains individuality and appears as individual mind. And so here, prana is the manifesting expression of the being, which is the unmanifested being, and then mind is the reflection of the cosmic intelligence on karma. It's very interesting to note here how the creation begins. It is said the creation begins at the meeting point of the mind and the prana, By virtue of this finest impression of karma, in essence, which is the impression of a experience, and it is the finest remains of the karma or action, that this reflection of the karma upon the being happens. So all the creation comes out of the reflection of being on karma, or the reflection of karma on being, and which holds together the whole instrumentality of prana, karma and the mind. So again, based on this reflection, the whole creation starts. And here the being remains unchanged in its eternal status, and the creation begins in its multiple phenomena just based on the instrumentality of karma, which is propelled by prana and carried out by the mind, leaving the being untouched. So here, mind seems to exist irrespective of being, and at the same time its essential nature is being. And why is this so? Because the status of creation is irrespective of being, and at the same time being is the essence of the whole creation, and it is pervaded. Being pervades the whole creation. So the wheel of karma continues. It keeps on creating, evolving and dissolving the phenomenal creation in cycles of existence and non-existence of the cosmos as a whole, and the individual finds its share in this unending wheel of karma. So again, the creation comes out of what we call karma, and by virtue of itself assumes the role of prana, the vital force of life and creation. We know very clearly that the absolute eternal being is the ultimate reality of existence, and by virtue of its own nature, the process of creation, evolution and dissolution continues eternally and without affecting the absolute status of eternal being. But the important aspect here is the relative phase coming from the karma finds an everlasting status in the cycles of creation and dissolution. It seems like it is infinite, but in reality there are no two ultimate realities. The ultimate is the being itself, and karma by its nature seems to be never ending. Now let us try to understand this further. When we look at karma, we find that without the mind, which is the doer, karma or action cannot be produced. So we see here that there is a interdependence of the mind and karma. And there is always this expression that mind is born of karma and creates karma, and karma is born of mind and creates mind. Again, try to understand this. Mind is born of karma, which creates further karma, and then karma is born of mind and creates again new mind. For example, the seed produces the tree and the tree produces the seed, and it cannot be determined which gave rise to which in the beginning. The starting point of the cycle of the seed and the tree cannot be specifically determined. It can only be said that the seed is the cause of the tree and the tree is the cause of the seed, but which started the cycle cannot be ascertained. So here, in the same way, it is difficult to decide whether karma is produced by mind or mind is produced by karma, and when this cycle actually began. All we can understand is that karma of the past life is responsible for the mind's identity in the present life, and the level of evolution gained by the mind in the past life gives it its status in the present life. And again, based on the karma of the past life, the mind starts in the present life. So, reflected upon by karma, the prana gains individuality and appears as individual mind. And this individual mind is found to be the reflection of the cosmic mind or cosmic intelligence. Again, we understand prana is the manifesting expression of the eternal ocean of unmanifested being, and mind is the reflection of cosmic intelligence on karma. So, continuing to understand this wheel of karma, that before the creation of the mind, there existed in principle the agency of karma. So this shows that there was creation before creation. Just like there was a day before this day and a night before this night. So this cycle of creation and dissolution is the eternal cycle in the eternity of being. And so in the process of creation, mind comes to be because there has been a mind before. And this mind has created some karma that continues to exist to form the basis of the present mind. So we further understand that the life of the individual and that of the cosmos is being created, maintained and dissolved by the force of karma. And this is why every individual and all the beings in the world are subject to this force of karma. And it is this force of karma that keeps maintaining the life in the relative field, and the individual is constantly kept out of the realm of pure being. But it is important to understand that no karma can ever reach the state of being. It is only by the process of karma one has to keep on moving in activity in the eternal cycle of birth and death, creation, evolution and dissolution. So, any process of bringing karma to an end would certainly result in the state of being. And how one can avoid this grip of karma? How one can come out of this cycle of continuing karma? And here the only way to do that is by attaining the state of the eternal being. This aspect of how we break the grip of this karma has also brought a lot of misunderstanding to many people, and the misinterpretation that absolute bliss consciousness of the self is opposed to the nature of karma. One started putting out theories that the life of activity in the world is opposed to the state of absolute bliss consciousness. And this misunderstanding has created a gulf between spiritual and material values of life that has existed for many, many centuries. So, it is now time to correct this mistake, and this is what Maharshi Ji has said. To practice the art of transcendence through transcendental meditation, and then the mind to come out of the relative state of experience and attain the state of being. Here, the mind is infused with the full value of being, because in the field of the transcendent, it is out of the field of karma, where it ceases to be individual mind and becomes one with absolute eternal being. Now, when the mind has gained the state of eternal being, the force of karma draws the mind out again, and then when it comes back into the relative field of activity, it realizes that the state of transcendental being was certainly better in its unlimited statue of absolute bliss. And this mind, which is drawn out because of the karma, also realizes the relative state of transitory happiness in the field of activity. And with the repeated practice, the mind becomes familiar with the transcendental state of consciousness, and when it comes out into the field of relative experience, its nature is transformed to a much higher state of consciousness. And further, the state of bliss consciousness of the transcendent makes a real impact upon the nature of the mind, and the mind also becomes more powerful having tasted the unbounded state of limitless expanded consciousness. And this continued practice of transcendence will have such a great impact on the nature of the being, on the mind, that the mind begins to live the nature of eternal being, and still continues to behave and experience in the field of relative existence. And here, it is the skill in action that needs to be developed. And the skill in action is bringing the activity of the mind to a state of stillness, and from that point starting the activity. And here, even the energy necessary to perform the action will be least. Ultimately, with the growth of consciousness, rising in consciousness into the cosmic and God consciousness, then the doer will be established in eternal being and will not be under the binding influence of action. And this is the true skill in action. And again, we understand it is the infusion of the being into the field of karma through the instrumentality of the mind, which is glorifying life at all levels, and then still leaving the mind free from bondage of karma. For example, in bright sunlight, candlelight loses its relative significance, and so also in the eternal light of the absolute bliss, the relative joys of life lose their attraction. And this is also explained as the loss of the binding influence of karma under the influence of the experience of absolute bliss of eternal being. And so here we are left with infinite possibilities by understanding this knowledge. The nature of karma and the nature of being are incompatible, but it is possible to glorify karma by the bliss of being. It is possible for a man to live in the field of action and yet simultaneously live a life of eternal freedom in the bliss consciousness of absolute being. It is possible for a man to act with full interest in the world and yet simultaneously live in God consciousness, thereby bringing together the values of the absolute and the relative existence together. So now we will go a little further and try to understand how one can improve the thinking, or as Maharshi Ji calls it, art of thinking, so that the one performs good actions or good karma always. We already understand that there is the individual mind, and this mind, when it continuously experiences the transcendent and then grows into the cosmic consciousness, then this mind becomes the cosmic mind. So we have a whole range here from the individual mind to the cosmic mind. Then naturally the activities of this mind which create the karma also then can be so varied from the individual mind to the cosmic mind. So it is through the practice of meditation that we can enable the mind to use its full potential naturally, to make the thought force powerful, and also add to it the power of all the natural laws. That means it gains the nature's support. And in addition, the thought should not bind the thinker and should instead prove to be the means of liberation from bondage. So here one naturally has to cultivate this art of thinking, whereby the least amount of mental energy is consumed and where the thought is expressed in its most powerful way. And this expression of the thought should be without strain or tension, and it also should be the right thought. There should not be useless thoughts and wrong thoughts. And again, these thoughts should be to help evolution, because we find, we realize that from these thoughts come the actions, and these, just as we said, the action should be evolutionary. So since the source of the action is the thought, so the thought itself should be evolutionary. The mind should be in freedom while engaged in activity of thought. So it should remain free from the binding influence of the thought, and in addition it should be used as a means for eternal freedom in God consciousness. And also this thinking should be clear. The clarity of thought depends upon the state of mind and the nervous system. If the nervous system is tired, then the mind cannot be clear and effective. And here we need to understand that a strong nervous system is very important for the mind to be strong and clear. Now, in order to have right thoughts all the time, it is very important to understand that the mind has to rise to the cosmic status. This is because there is no way of intellectually ascertaining what thought is absolutely right. Second, even if the rightness of a thought could be judged intellectually, it could be judged only after the thought has already risen. The thought could then be scrutinized and it could be found out whether it is right or not. But by that time, the thinker and the atmosphere have already been influenced according to the quality of that thought. That means you have already created the karma without even knowing whether the thought is right or wrong. And then we realize that the thoughts should be less and they should be useful, and every thought should be creative, and it is not good to continuously think and having these long chains of thoughts, because then there is wasted energy. and life becomes very impracticable, and there is no precision or power of decision in life. So the thought has to be creative and have a constructive purpose in life. And also, it is very important for the mind to remain contented in the bliss of its own being, because it is only from this level then the thought that is right and useful, either for the thinker or for the surroundings, will naturally rise. And so, when we rise in consciousness, and when the individual mind then, through its repeated contact with the being, and it's repeatedly being infused more and more with the transcendental consciousness, becomes cosmic or attains the cosmic state, then everything becomes very powerful with the mind. Not only are the thoughts powerful and creative, but also all of the nature's support comes. The nature's support comes from the being. And so every thought becomes important and less energy is used, and spontaneously right thoughts come. And in this way, then the mind is naturally aligned to dharma or the natural laws, and starts bringing out thoughts which are aligned to dharma, which in turn become dharmic actions. And in addition, this mind which is experiencing the bliss of the Absolute remains contented and loses its interest in the temporary and the fleeting joys that the senses has to give. And this is how the mind is liberated. It moves from this repeated cycle of karma and mind, and this repeated cycle of birth and death, and attains the absolute state in freedom. We will continue on this, and Maharshi Ji will be speaking a lot more once we come back again, enter into Bhagavad Gita. But I thought it's important that you understand this knowledge, because knowledge is very powerful. Then it will help you to be in transcendence regularly and keep continuing this expansion of this consciousness in the mind, expansion of this absolute consciousness in the mind, and rising it to the level of the cosmic status. So I will end here. Jai Gurudev, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.